All right, so this lecture we're going to continue talking about different biomes that we see around the planet. During class, we started talking about terrestrial biomes and looking at the factors that contribute to the terrestrial biome. The temperature, precipitation, latitude. We could also again go back and talk about elevation, and we discussed tropical biomes, and then we broke the tropical down into the sub-biomes, like the rainforest versus tropical dry forests or seasonal forests, and then the tropical grasslands, and then even deserts. Those are found typically in the tropical zone. We're now wanting to talk about temperate biomes, biomes that fit into what we consider the temperate zone. So generally above and below tropical zones. So when we discuss temperate, things we want to remember about temperate biomes is that they have, just kind of a review here, they have distinct seasons. So there is a defined spring, summer, fall, winter, and then it rolls back around. And the levels of precipitation vary across these seasons. So we know during summer in a temperate biome, we probably aren't going to get as much rain as we see in the spring or maybe later in the fall. So there's that typical pattern, that general pattern that we're going to see in temperate biomes. So first one to discuss, just briefly kind of re-emphasizing some of the things here, are temperate grasslands. We have lots of grasses and seasonal herbaceous flowering plants, meaning they're not persistent. The plants grow up, they die off in the fall, they rot, they decompose, and then they come back from seed in the spring. They're not woody plants. They're not those big, thick vegetative structures that will persist. Grasslands might have a few trees, but it's typically not a major part of these biomes. The trees in a grassland tend to be towards rivers or creeks, areas where there's more consistent water, consistent moisture. But a big feature in temperate grasslands is they have thick, rich organic soil because there's so much decomposition. All of that grass, that vegetation you're looking at in that picture there of the prairie, that all rots and decomposes every single year. So lots of nutrients are cycled into the soil, and it makes it fantastic place for these types of plants. So when we look at those thick soils, it's unfortunately caused most grasslands to be converted into farmland. It's no coincidence that the Midwest is the agricultural belt of the US because we used to have prairies here, but we've converted the vast majority of our prairies into farmland because it's such rich, good soil. Life in the grasslands tends to be very adapted to fire, drought, and freezing. Now, the nice thing is you don't have to be adapted to drought for 6, 8, 9 months, a year and a half like a desert, just during the summer. Think about July and August. Typically, we go into drought for 4, 6, 8 weeks. Freezing. We have periods of cold in the winter. We get cold and we freeze for 2, 3, 4 weeks. Then we're back to spring. So with those gradual seasonal changes, life doesn't have to be adapted to this drought or freezing for long, extensive periods of time. So a lot of the life in a temperate environments just goes dormant when you have a drought, or dormant when it's freezing, and then it springs back up. It doesn't migrate out. It doesn't disappear from the ecosystem. It just goes into a dormancy period. Okay, so those are the temperate grasslands. There's our graph of moisture and temperature distribution. We tend to see the hottest months of the year, June, July, August, typically for most grasslands. Shrublands, or we can call them chaparro. These are a type of temperate biome where they experience warm, dry summers and then cool, cool, moist winters. Okay, so they don't usually freeze up and get crazy cold and the same freezing we have in the grasslands. Less cold, a little bit more moderate temperatures. But what we will see with most shrublands or chaparral is that species here tend to be adapted to fire. A lot of the species of vegetation, that is, need to be burned in order for new growth. Seeds need to be burned in order for germination to occur. So fire is an important part of chaparral biomes. Controlled fire. If it's too big, it gets out of control, there's too much vegetation, then it becomes a significant problem. So chaparral is the temperate zone that likes to be burned periodically to refresh life in that zone. All right, now let's get into temperate deciduous forest. This is what we have in Illinois. This is one of our native biomes. Illinois has prairie, and when we talk about terrestrial, prairie and temperate deciduous forests. So we are going through gradual seasonal changes. We start the semester in summer, and then as we continue, we progress into fall, and then at the very end of the semester, we can say we're now moving into winter and officially getting into the winter season in this particular biome. So there's a lot of plant growth in the summer. You know, we get that late spring, early summer. We got plenty of moisture. We get a lot of photosynthesis and a lot of plant growth happening. Our seasons are pretty well defined in the temperate deciduous forests. Plants here will lose their leaves seasonally. Okay, so when the fall approaches and the temperatures drop and the moisture levels drop, temperature, moisture, and light levels decrease, plants recognize this and say, hey, time to shut down. Let's go towards a dormancy period. It's why the leaves are starting to change color right now. And as we continue throughout the semester, we'll see the leaves continue to change color as those plants are moving towards their dormancy period. So a lot of woody vegetation in a deciduous forest. There's enough rainfall to support tree life. You know, grasslands, there's just not enough rainfall to support tree life. In the deciduous forest, we do have that rainfall that can support the tree life and enable the biome to have that type of plant life. So that producer base becomes a bit larger in the deciduous forest compared to those temperate grasslands we were just looking at. So here's our graph. You take a look at moisture and temperature levels and things like that, and okay, it gets hot in the summer, but then it cools down. You don't like the weather, wait a couple days, and it's going to change in a temperate type of biome. Tropical biomes, weather patterns don't change that much. It's not like, oh, if it's 90 degrees today in the tropics, it's going to be significantly different in 2 or 3 days. Temperate biomes, we get some significant changes in small periods of time. So, you know, the joke about Illinois, you don't like the weather, wait a day or two and it changes. So remember, this is our native biome along with those grasslands. So when we talk about conservation and habitat restoration, these are the two biomes we could restore Illinois back to. We can't restore Illinois to a tropical forest. We can't restore it to a chaparral biome or a desert biome because we don't have the correct abiotic conditions for that type of restoration. You have to look at what was originally here and then try to bring back that same type of biome. Now, with climate change happening, we do need to recognize we might need to make adjustments, but that doesn't mean a radical, let's go from deciduous forest to desert adjustment. but maybe a slight shift with certain species that would be ideal in this environment. So again, later topic for restoration and conservation. So, all right, now this is going to make a lot of people go, what? No, really? Temperate rainforests. Believe it or not, we have temperate rainforests. Rainforests always make people think of hot and humid and crazy. Rainforest means lots of rain. It doesn't necessarily mean you have heat. So in the United States, we have temperate rainforests. These types of forests experience mild temperatures year-round. Kind of 60s, 50s to maybe upper 70s most of the year. Pretty mild temperatures throughout the entire year. They have an abundant level of rainfall throughout the entire year. So they qualify as a rainforest, but because their temperatures are not as high as the tropics, they fit into the temperate zone. So we're not seeing big swings in temperatures across the seasons. We're seeing kind of a stable, fairly stabilizing type of temperature range within a temperate rainforest. Go out to Seattle, go over to Washington State along the coast because of the topography of the mountains and the proximity to the coast. There are temperate rainforests in the Pacific Northwest. So we'll see that in that part of the United States. So again, our graph, they have abundant rainfall. You take a look at this. They get a lot of rain, January, February, March, April, even into May. Then it drops down. Could say, oh, dry season, but then you get into September, October, November, and it comes back. There's just a lot of rain in this environment, which promotes a lot of that vegetation, that growth in those forests. Again, without the temperature swings. So you look at the temperature graph, that red line, yeah, it gets warm, it cools down, but it's not the same peak of temperature that we saw in the tropics. And if you remember, the tropics was kind of a straight line across with temperature. It doesn't fluctuate as much. This is why this is a temperate type of biome. Oh, sorry, there we go. Okay, so we got the temperate rainforests. Now, a big biome that covers a lot of the world is known as the boreal forests. Now, boreal is going to be northern forests. This forest tends to have a mixture of conifers, pines and those types of trees, and deciduous trees. Tends to be at a higher latitude, between 50 to 60. Let me get the low degree symbol here. 50 to 60 degrees north latitude. So again, a much northern elevation type of biome. Temperate though. You know, we don't see these huge fluctuations in things. It's primarily dominated with those conifers. There are deciduous trees. There are deciduous trees in that environment, but the conifers, the pines, those things tend to be more prevalent than the deciduous trees. So if you hear the term taiga, this is the northernmost edge of the boreal forest. So as we move up towards the Arctic, we will go through boreal, and then we get up into the taiga and get into that particular biome there. Okay, so in the next lecture, we'll wrap up the boreal forest, and then we'll keep pushing north all the way through Canada, and we'll get ourselves up into what's known as the tundra. So check that out in part 2.